I personally believe that every nominee for the Supreme Court should receive an up or down vote after they have passed out of committee. My record has been pretty clear, pretty consistent. Some might even suggest boring in its consistency. But I made a very strong commitment after I returned to the Senate at the end of 2010 and said I did not believe that filibustering our judges was what we should be doing. And so, might not have liked the judges that were before us, but I did not participate in a filibuster of a judge. Had an opportunity to vote up or down, and I thought that that was the reasonable way to proceed. I believe that it is fair to the individual and it's fair to the institution. But I also recognize that the timing of this confirmation that we have before us will serve to reinforce the public perception about political influence on the court. And I would hope that we all recognize that public confidence in our courts must be an imperative. We have to believe that justice is going to be equal for all of us. Now, I know that my colleagues are not surprised to hear me discuss my concern about the politicization of the court. I made a similar point during the impeachment trial when some wanted to literally tear down Chief Justice Roberts and the court because they needed a soundbite for a political ad in the primary campaign. I made the same case when I voted against the nomination of now Justice Kavanaugh. Also during that impeachment trial, I implored the members of this chamber to look inward, to really evaluate, are we really willing to tear down not only the other party, but the other institutions of our government as well? So I have looked inward, considering in these difficult days what I believe is best for the institutions of our government. And I recognize that confirming this nominee is not going to heal, it's not going to salve the wounds that these institutions have endured, but neither will threats that, should the balance of power in this chamber change, that everything is on the table, including the end of the legislative filibuster and packing the court. To do that would only inflict even deeper wounds, fundamentally and dramatically altering how the levers of power operate in this country, compromising the one branch of government that must remain apolitical. We're the legislative branch, the executive branch. Both of these branches are inherently political. It is the third branch, our courts, that we count on to be apolitical. I think it would be a giant leap further down a path that we should not be following in the first place. So we got to figure out how we de-escalate. So let me very simply explain this afternoon how I plan to vote over the next 2 days, starting with the procedural motions, which I opposed yesterday. I will oppose again tomorrow. In 2016, after the unfortunate death of Justice Scalia, I said that the Senate should not take up a nominee to fill that seat due to the impending presidential election. I reiterated that statement in August of this year, and then coincidentally enough, just hours before the news of Justice Ginsburg's passing that saddened the country. I didn't know that she had passed when I reaffirmed my comments from earlier, but that knowledge would not have changed my mind. I remain in the same place today. I do not believe that moving forward on a nominee just over a week removed from a pitched presidential election, when partisan tensions are running about as high as they could, I don't think that this will help our country become a better version of itself. But frankly, I've lost that procedural fight. We saw that with the vote yesterday. So what I can do now is be consistent with the precedent that I have set for myself and oppose a process that I said should not move forward, and I've done that. But at the end of the process is the substantive question of whether Judge Barrett should be categorically rejected as an associate justice in order to underscore my procedural objection. I believe that the only way to put us back on the path of appropriate consideration of judicial nominees is to evaluate Judge Barrett as we would want to be judged, on the merits of her qualifications. And we do that when that final question comes before us. And when it does, I will be a yes. I have no doubt about her intellect. I have no doubt about Judge Barrett's judicial temperament. I have no doubt about her capability to do the job and to do it well. By now, most people are very familiar with her qualifications. They've seen her resume, the bio. She's been all over the news, but it is significant. Her background, graduating with honors from Rhodes College and with honors from Notre Dame Law School, clerked on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, was an excellent professor for 15 years at Notre Dame Law School prior to being confirmed to the bench on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. I helped confirm her to that seat on the Seventh Circuit. I have followed on from that time when I first came to know of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. I've done my due diligence in my role of advice and consent. I have worked through the articles that she has written, the cases that she has written. I have engaged in a lengthy one-on-one with her. I watched both full days when she appeared before the Judiciary Committee. She presented herself admirably under a difficult situation. We all know around here that confirmation processes are not pretty. I have expressed my concerns previously that good people will decide that the confirmation process as we have it now, sometimes an awful process, that I worry that they're going to think that it's just not worth it, not worth what it puts them and their families through, and they opt out. They opt to avoid government service. And on this note, I will say that while some of the rhetoric from my colleagues has been overblown and unnecessary, this process with Judge Barrett is not nearly what it was in 2018 during the confirmation of Justice Kavanaugh. So ultimately, I am glad, I'm thankful that Judge Barrett did not opt out. I have concluded that she is the sort of person that we want on the Supreme Court. Her legal writing is excellent and will be an asset to her, as well as future generations of lawyers as they read through her opinions. Her intellectual curiosity, which is demonstrated by the depth and breadth of her academic work as a professor, will also serve the country well. Her temperament and her very patient nature were on full display over the course of the hearing. I had a good, I think, a very substantive discussion with Judge Barrett about some Alaska-related matters, focusing on Alaska-specific statutes like ANILCA. I raised some of the public safety challenges that we face in my home state that serve to undermine the principle of equal justice under the law. I raised the issue of voting rights and access to the ballot. It was important for me to hear and to better understand her views on precedents and her evaluation process, specifically the weight that she affords reliance on decisions that have been in place for decades, such as Roe versus Wade. We discussed the doctrine of severability in regards to the Affordable Care Act case. We spoke at length about my concern that the Supreme Court is increasingly viewed as political by the public and what that then does to erode the public confidence in the impartiality of our courts. We talked about the criteria and the evaluation that a justice would undergo for purposes of recusal from a matter. I do not believe Judge Barrett will take her seat on the bench with a predetermined agenda or with a goal of putting a torch to every volume of the United States reports. Justices should come to the court with an open mind, willing to be convinced by the arguments presented in each case, to exchange thoughts with their colleagues, to learn new things, and rule as the law requires. And I am convinced that Judge Barrett will do just that. So while I oppose the process that has led us to this point, I do not hold it against her as an individual who has navigated the gauntlet with grace, skill, and humility. I will vote no on the procedural votes ahead of us, but yes to confirm Judge Barrett when the question before us is her qualification to be an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.